It was our 9th anniversary, and Olivia had pulled out all the stops. She booked a private table at Bella Luna, the fanciest Italian restaurant in town. Candlelight flickered between us as we toasted to another year together. Her smile was radiant, her laughter infectious. If anyone had looked at us that night, they'd think we were the perfect couple. I thought so too, until I found the keycard. The evening had ended with a slow walk back to our house. Olivia, as usual, insisted on carrying her oversized purse. "It has everything I might need," she joked, winking at me when I teased her about packing for a weekend instead of a dinner. Back home, she excused herself to take a shower, and I started tidying up. That's when her purse caught my eye, perched on the kitchen counter. I wasn't snooping, I swear. I only meant to unpack it, maybe surprise her by organizing the chaos of receipts, makeup, and gum wrappers. But then, tucked beneath her wallet and sunglasses, I found it. A sleek, rectangular hotel keycard with the name The Silver Ridge and embossed in gold. At first, I didn't think much of it. Olivia traveled often for work, and the Silver Ridge and wasn't far from her office. But as I turned the card over in my hand, something didn't sit right. She'd never mentioned staying there. It wasn't one of her usual spots, and the date stamped on the back, last weekend, lined up with a time she claimed to be visiting her sister out of town. When Olivia walked back into the room, her hair wrapped in a towel, I held up the keycard. "Hey, you left this in your purse." She froze. For just a fraction of a second, her face changed, her smile faltered. Her eyes darted to the card and back to me. Then she laughed, waving it off. "Oh, that must have been from my last business trip. I meant to toss it." Her explanation was casual, almost too casual. Olivia was never one to forget details, let alone leave a random keycard in her purse. But I didn't press her. Not then. I told myself I was imagining things. Maybe she really had just forgotten. We went to bed like nothing had happened. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling, her laughter from dinner echoed in my ears, hollow now. That brief hesitation when I showed her the keycard, it gnawed at me. Olivia had always been quick on her feet, but this time, her lie was clumsy. Something was off. I couldn't shake the feeling. And for the first time in years, I didn't trust my wife. The keycard didn't leave my mind. I tried to brush it off during the week, but it stuck to me like a burr. Every time I thought I'd let it go, some small detail about Olivia's behavior would reignite my unease. It started with her phone. Olivia had never been one to guard her screen, but now it was practically glued to her hand. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd close whatever app she was on or angle the screen away. A few times, I caught her texting late at night, smiling at something I couldn't see. "What's so funny?" I asked one evening, trying to keep my tone light. "Just a meme from work," she replied, locking her phone and turning to me with that practiced, easy smile of hers. Nothing exciting. I wanted to believe her. God, I wanted to. But the problem was, once you start doubting someone, everything becomes a potential clue. Every extra minute she spent getting ready in the morning, every impromptu, late meeting, every text she brushed off as unimportant, it all started piling up in my head, brick by suspicious brick. Then there was the perfume. Olivia had always been partial to floral scents, but lately, she'd switched to something heavier, muskier. I only noticed because she wore it every time she went out for work. It clung to her when she came home, and once, I found the bottle in her bag. It wasn't cheap, and it definitely wasn't her usual style. I couldn't stop replaying the moment I found the keycard. The way her face had shifted, just for a second, before she covered it with a laugh. It felt rehearsed, calculated. The kind of reaction you give when you're trying to think of a cover story. Finally, I decided I needed answers. Real ones. No more brushing things under the rug and pretending everything was fine. If there was something going on, I had to know. The next day, I told Olivia I needed to run some errands. She kissed me goodbye and went back to scrolling through her phone. I drove across town, my heart pounding the whole way, until I pulled into the parking lot of the Silver Ridge Inn. The hotel wasn't anything fancy, just a mid-range place tucked off the freeway, the kind of spot business travelers used for quick overnight stays. I felt like an idiot as I walked through the sliding glass doors, the keycard burning a hole in my pocket. Part of me still hoped this was all a misunderstanding, that I'd check the room and find nothing out of the ordinary. But I had to know. The front desk clerk barely glanced at me as I approached. "How can I help you?" she asked, her tone bored. I hesitated, gripping the key card in my pocket. I think I left something in my room last week," I said, forcing a smile. "I'm not sure if I still have access, but can I check?" "Room, I trailed off, pretending to search my memory. She arched an eyebrow but didn't ask any questions. "What's the name on the reservation?" My stomach twisted. "Olivia Harper," I said, praying she wouldn't ask for ID. The clerk tapped at her keyboard, nodded, and slid a room number across the counter. "Third floor, room 312. I took the elevator up, every ding feeling like a countdown to something I wasn't ready for. When I reached room 312, my hands were trembling as I slid the keycard into the slot. The light flashed green, and the lock clicked open. The room smelled faintly of her perfume. My heart sank. The door creaked open, and I stepped inside. The room was neat, standard for a mid-range hotel. A queen-size bed with crisp white sheets, a small desk with a chair, and a flat-screen TV mounted on the wall. But the air felt heavy, like I was stepping into a crime scene. At first, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The bed was made, and the bathroom door was slightly ajar, revealing a clean countertop. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I'd find nothing and could go back to pretending everything was fine. Then I spotted the overnight bag. It was tucked into the corner near the closet. My breath caught as I walked over and crouched down. The bag wasn't hers, at least not one I'd seen before. But when I unzipped it, there was no mistaking the contents. A silk scarf I'd bought Olivia for Christmas. A bottle of her favorite perfume. A pair of high heels I'd never seen her wear at home. I stood there, staring at the bag, my hands shaking. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to stop, to walk away and leave this nightmare unopened. But I couldn't. I rummaged further, my heart pounding in my chest. At the bottom of the bag was a small stack of papers, a collection of love notes, folded and creased like they'd been passed back and forth in secret. My hands trembled as I unfolded the first one, recognizing Olivia's handwriting instantly. "Can't wait to see you again. Counting the hours. EXO." The next one was worse. "Last night was incredible. I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me forget everything else." I didn't need to read more. I shoved the notes back into the bag and zipped it closed, my vision blurring with anger and humiliation. My wife, my Olivia, had been here, in this room, with someone else. Someone she'd apparently been meeting regularly, judging by the bag and the notes. I turned to leave, desperate to get out of that suffocating room. But as I passed the nightstand, something else caught my eye. A room service receipt, dated 2 days ago, with a name scribbled in a bold, unfamiliar hand. James. James. I didn't know who he was, but I hated him instantly. My mind reeled as I tried to process everything. The hotel keycard, the bag, the notes, and now this stranger's name, tied to my wife's betrayal. I snapped a few photos of the bag, the notes, and the receipt with my phone. If I was going to confront Olivia, I needed proof. I left everything else untouched, not wanting to give her any reason to suspect I'd been there. The ride home was a blur. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, my mind racing with questions I didn't want to answer. How long had this been going on? Why had she done this? And what the hell was I going to do about it? By the time I pulled into the driveway, I'd made up my mind. I wouldn't confront her yet, not until I had more information. If Olivia wanted to lie to me, I was going to let her dig her own grave. But I wasn't going to sit back and let her walk all over me. The game had just begun. By the time I got home, Olivia was already in the kitchen, humming softly as she chopped vegetables for dinner. The scene was almost comically domestic, given what I'd just uncovered. She looked up when I walked in, flashing me that same smile I'd fallen for years ago. Now, it felt hollow, almost mocking. "How were your errands?" she asked, glancing at me as she wiped her hands on a dish towel. "Fine," I said, forcing my voice to stay even. I didn't trust myself to say more. My mind was still replaying the images from the hotel room, the notes, the bag, that damned receipt. I needed to confront her, but I couldn't let my anger control the situation. I had to be calculated. We ate dinner in near silence, Olivia seemingly unbothered by the lack of conversation. If anything, she seemed more relaxed than usual, like she dropped some invisible weight. It made my stomach turn. Afterward, as she was cleaning up, I leaned against the counter and pulled my phone from my pocket. "I found something interesting today," I said casually. "Oh," she replied without looking up. I opened the photo gallery and scrolled to the images from the hotel room. "Yeah, this." I held the phone out to her. Her reaction was instantaneous. The blood drained from her face, and her hand froze mid-swipe across the countertop. What is that?" "You tell me," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "That's your bag, isn't it? Your perfume, your scarf. And these," I swiped to the photo of the love notes. "This is your handwriting, Olivia." For a moment, she just stared at the screen, her mouth opening and closing like she couldn't find the words. Then, like a switch had flipped, she shook her head and laughed, a hollow, brittle sound. "Nathan, it's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I echoed, my voice rising. "You've been meeting someone at that hotel?" "I saw the notes, Olivia. I saw the receipt. Are you seriously going to stand there and tell me this is all a coincidence?" She set the dish towel down and crossed her arms, her expression hardening. "Okay, fine," she snapped. "Yes, I've been meeting someone. But it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded. "Who the hell is James?" Her eyes flicked away, and for a moment, I thought she wasn't going to answer. Then she sighed, the defiance draining out of her. He's someone I met at a work event. Things just happened." "Things just happened?" I repeated, disbelief crashing over me. "Olivia, you've been sneaking off to hotels with this guy, writing him love notes, lying to my face. Don't you dare tell me it just happened." She flinched but quickly recovered, her tone shifting to something almost pleading. "Nathan, I didn't mean for this to happen. I've been so unhappy lately, and he made me feel alive again. I know it was wrong, but I didn't know how to tell you." "Alive?" I barked out a bitter laugh. "So your solution to being unhappy was to cheat? To lie to me for God knows how long?" Tears welled in her eyes, and she reached out to touch my arm. "Nathan, please. I'm so sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I still love you." "Don't." I cut her off, stepping back. "Don't you dare tell me you love me. If you loved me, you wouldn't have done this." She started crying then, the kind of dramatic sobbing that might have worked on me in another life. But all I felt was anger, white-hot and unrelenting. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her. "I need some air," I said, turning on my heel and heading for the door. "Nathan, wait," she called after me, but I was already gone. The night air hit me like a slap, cold and sharp against my skin. I paced the driveway, my thoughts a chaotic mess. Part of me wanted to go back inside and keep pressing her, to demand every sordid detail. But another part of me, the rational part, knew I needed to take a step back. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But if Olivia thought she could cry her way out of this, she was in for a rude awakening. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of coffee. Olivia was in the kitchen, still puffy-eyed from the night before, but acting as if nothing had happened. She was humming softly, stirring sugar into her mug, the picture of calm domesticity. I ignored her and grabbed my own mug without a word. She glanced at me, hesitant, but didn't say anything either. The silence between us was thick, almost tangible. I wasn't ready to talk yet. I needed to figure out my next move. That plan, however, didn't get very far. By mid-morning, the doorbell rang. I was in the living room, sorting through some papers, and Olivia had gone upstairs. I figured it was probably a delivery, so I opened the door without thinking. Standing there, leaning casually against the doorframe, was a man. Mid-30s, tall, fit, with the kind of confident smirk that made me want to punch him on sight. He didn't wait for an introduction. "Hey, you must be Nathan," he said, holding out his hand like this was a friendly visit. I stared at him, dumbfounded. "Who the hell are you?" The smirk widened. "James. I thought Olivia would have told you about me by now." "James." I didn't realize my hands had curled into fists until I felt my nails digging into my palms. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Just thought I'd stop by," he said nonchalantly, as if he wasn't standing on my porch after sleeping with my wife. "Figured it was time we met, man to man." Man to man? I could barely believe what I was hearing. Before I could respond, Olivia's voice called from upstairs. "Who is it?" James leaned around me, looking into the house like he owned the place. "It's me, Liv." Footsteps thundered down the stairs, and Olivia appeared, her face draining of color when she saw him. "James, what are you doing here?" Her voice was sharp, panicked. "I told you I'd handle this," she hissed, stepping between us. "You weren't supposed to come here." "Oh, come on, Liv. It's not like it's a secret anymore." He turned back to me, his expression smug. "Look, Nathan, let's cut to the chase. Olivia and I are together. She told me she was going to leave you, so I thought I'd make things easier by—" "Easier?" I interrupted, my voice low and dangerous. "You think showing up at my house uninvited is going to make this easier?" He had the audacity to shrug. "I just figured we'd get it out in the open. She doesn't love you anymore, man. No point dragging this out." Olivia tried to shush him, but it was too late. Every word was a fresh slap to the face. The anger I'd been holding back boiled over. "Get the hell off my property," I said, stepping closer. My voice was calm, but every muscle in my body was coiled tight, ready to explode. "Now." James hesitated, like he couldn't believe I wasn't backing down. Olivia grabbed his arm, tugging him toward the door. "James, go. Please." He rolled his eyes, but finally turned to leave. Before he stepped off the porch, he looked back over his shoulder. "You know, Nathan, maybe if you'd been a better husband, this wouldn't have happened." That did it. I surged forward, but Olivia threw herself in front of me, her hands on my chest. "Nathan, stop," she shouted. "He's not worth it." I stared at her, breathing hard, every nerve screaming at me to throw this guy into the street. But somehow, I held back. James smirked one last time and walked away, leaving Olivia and me standing there in the open doorway. As soon as he was out of sight, I turned to her. "This is what you've been doing? Letting this jackass walk all over my life?" "It's not like that," she started, but I cut her off. "Save it, Olivia. I've heard enough." My voice was cold, final. "You brought this into my house. You let him into our lives. Whatever happens next, you earned it." For the first time, she looked genuinely scared. And she should have been. I spent the rest of the day in a cold, calculated haze. James's smug face and Olivia's pathetic excuses replayed in my head like a broken record. That was it. I was done being blindsided. If they wanted to play dirty, I'd beat them at their own game. The first step was strategy. I needed someone I could trust, someone who would help me think this through without letting emotion cloud my judgment. That's when I called Rebecca, my older sister. Rebecca had a no-nonsense attitude and a way of cutting through the chaos to get to the heart of any situation. When I explained everything to her, she didn't sugarcoat her reaction. "Nathan, she's trash. Absolute trash. You don't need to waste another second on her, but if you're staying in this house with her, you better protect yourself." She was right. I've already taken photos of the hotel room and that receipt. I have her notes, too. "Good. Now you need a lawyer," Rebecca said firmly. "Someone who's sharp and won't let her manipulate the situation. And Nathan, lock down your finances. Today." She wasn't wrong. Olivia's sudden tears and pleas for forgiveness weren't about love. They were about control. She thought she could spin this in her favor, but not this time. I spent the next few hours making calls. Rebecca put me in touch with her friend Mr. Chandler, a divorce attorney with a reputation for being ruthless. After briefing him on the situation, he gave me the hard truth. "Nathan, you're in a good position because you've been documenting everything. Keep doing that. Don't confront her further until we have everything in place. If she's as manipulative as she sounds, she might try to frame you as the bad guy." Frame me? The idea made my blood boil, but I couldn't let rage control me. Chandler laid out the plan. Freeze our joint accounts, secure my personal assets, and start gathering even more evidence. The key was to stay calm and methodical. That night, Olivia tried to bridge the distance with her usual act. She sat next to me on the couch, her voice soft and pleading. Nathan, I know you're upset, but I meant what I said. I want to fix this. I glanced at her, my face unreadable. Fix it how, Olivia? By lying to me some more? By sneaking around with James while you're telling me we're working on our marriage? She flinched, and for a moment, I saw a flash of anger behind her eyes. But then the crocodile tears returned. Nathan, I'm sorry. I don't know what else you want me to say. I want you to be honest for once in your life, I said sharply. But I'm not holding my breath. Her jaw tightened, and she stood abruptly, the mask slipping for just a moment. Fine. If you're going to be like this, I don't know why I'm even trying. She stormed upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The cold, calculated part of me took over again. I knew her. I knew she wasn't just going to roll over and admit defeat. Olivia always had a backup plan, and I'd bet my last dollar it involved protecting herself at my expense. That suspicion was confirmed the next day. While she was out, probably working through her feelings with James, I took the chance to search her laptop. What I found made my blood run cold. Emails, dozens of them, sent to James over the last 6 months. Plans to leave me, discussions about my assets, and even vague mentions of setting the stage in case things got messy. One email stood out. If he fights me on this, we'll just have to make him look bad. I can handle it. Make me look bad. My hands shook as I scrolled through the messages, documenting everything with screenshots. She wasn't just betraying me. She was actively plotting against me. And James? He was complicit in all of it. I called Rebecca immediately. It's worse than I thought. Her voice was sharp. What did you find? They're planning to frame me for something. I don't know what yet, but I'm not waiting to find out. Rebecca didn't hesitate. Nathan, you need to move fast. Lock her out of everything. Talk to Chandler again. And don't let her suspect a thing. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. I'm done playing nice. By the end of the day, I'd frozen our accounts, changed the locks, and moved anything valuable to a secure location. Olivia would know something was up when she came home, but I didn't care. The gloves were off. She thought she was in control, but the tides were about to turn, and when they did, she wouldn't see it coming. When Olivia got home that evening, she looked around the house like something was off, though she didn't say anything right away. She set her bag on the counter and smiled, a tight, forced thing that didn't. How was your day? She asked, her voice overly casual. Productive, I replied, matching her tone. I didn't elaborate. Let her stew. It didn't take long for her to notice the changes. While we ate dinner in silence, she checked her phone. Her face shifted as she tapped the screen, her brow furrowing deeper with each second. I watched her out of the corner of my eye, waiting for the explosion. Finally, she set her fork down and turned to me. Nathan, what's going on with the bank account? I shrugged. What do you mean? I mean I can't access it, she said, her voice rising. Our joint account. It's locked or something. Oh, that, I said, feigning surprise. I made some changes. Changes? Her voice sharpened. What kind of changes? I leaned back in my chair, meeting her gaze head-on. I froze the account. Considering everything that's been going on, I thought it was the smart thing to do. Her eyes widened, then narrowed. You had no right. I have every right, I interrupted, my voice cold. It's my money too, Olivia. And given how freely you've been spending your time and attention on James, I figured I'd take precautions. Her face flushed with anger, and for a moment, I thought she might throw her glass of wine at me. This is ridiculous, Nathan. You're being paranoid. This has nothing to do with. Cut the crap, Olivia, I said, slamming my hand on the table. I know everything. The hotel, the emails, your plans to screw me over. So spare me the innocent act. She froze, her mouth opening and closing as she scrambled for a response. Finally, she settled on outrage. You went through my things? That's an invasion of privacy. I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. Privacy? You're really going to talk to me about privacy after sneaking around behind my back for months? Don't make me laugh. For a moment, she just stared at me, her chest rising and falling with quick, angry breaths. Then she stood abruptly, pushing her chair back so hard it nearly tipped over. "This is unbelievable," she hissed. "I made a mistake, Nathan, but you're taking this way too far." "Mistake?" I repeated, standing to face her. "A mistake is forgetting our anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. What you did wasn't a mistake, Olivia. It was calculated, deliberate betrayal." She didn't respond. Instead, she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room. A minute later, I heard the front door slam. I sank back into my chair, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to chase after her, to keep arguing until there was nothing left to say. But the other part, the rational part, knew it was better this way. Let her run to James. Let her think she had the upper hand. She didn't know the half of what I had planned. The next morning, I met with Chandler again to go over the legal steps. He was pleased with the progress I'd made. "You've set yourself up well, Nathan. Keep documenting everything. The more evidence we have, the better your case will be." By the time I got home, Olivia was there, her mood icy. She didn't speak to me, but I could feel her anger simmering beneath the surface. She didn't try to access the accounts again, probably because she knew she wouldn't win that fight, but I could tell she was scheming. The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. I had spent nights compiling everything: screenshots of the emails, photos from the hotel room, recordings of Olivia's attempts to gaslight me, and even the smug little monologue James gave on my porch. Every detail of their betrayal was laid out in excruciating clarity. Chandler advised me to tread carefully, but I wasn't just after legal justice. I wanted the truth to be undeniable. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Olivia had planned a small gathering at our house for some mutual friends. She framed it as a way to smooth over the tension between us, but I knew better. It was her attempt to control the narrative, to play the devoted wife, and make me look like the unreasonable one. Fine, let her try. The night of the party, the house was filled with laughter and conversation. Olivia wore her best hostess smile, fluttering between guests like she didn't have a care in the world. James wasn't there, thankfully, but his shadow loomed over every interaction. I bided my time, playing the quiet, supportive husband. I could feel Rebecca's eyes on me from across the room, her silent encouragement keeping me steady. When the moment felt right, I tapped my glass with a fork, silencing the chatter. "Everyone, thank you for coming tonight," I began, my tone calm and measured. "Olivia and I have been going through a lot lately, and I think it's important to be honest with the people closest to us." Olivia froze, her glass halfway to her lips. The color drained from her face as I continued. "I've recently learned some unsettling things about our relationship," I said, glancing at her. "Things I think you all deserve to know." "Nathan, don't," she whispered, her voice low and desperate, but I was done protecting her. I pulled out my phone and connected it to the TV, projecting the first slide from my carefully curated presentation. It was a photo of the hotel room, her bag, the notes, the receipt. "This is from a room at the Silver Ridge Inn," I said, addressing the group. "A room Olivia has been using to meet her lover, James." The room fell silent, every pair of eyes darting between Olivia and the screen. She started to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. "I'm not done," I said coldly. I flipped to the next slide, screenshots of the emails between Olivia and James. Gasps rippled through the room as the messages appeared, each one more damning than the last. Then came the recording of James at my doorstep, his arrogant words echoing through the speakers. "I told her this would come out eventually," I said, my voice hard. But she insisted on lying to everyone, pretending nothing was wrong. Olivia was trembling now, tears streaming down her face. "Nathan, please," she begged. "This isn't fair." "Fair?" I snapped, turning to face her. "You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you lied to me? When you plotted to destroy our marriage, to frame me for your mistakes?" The crowd was in chaos. Some people were shouting, others whispering furiously to one another. Rebecca stood by my side, her arms crossed, a look of quiet satisfaction on her face. One of Olivia's friends, Claire, stood up. "Olivia, is this true?" she demanded. "Did you really do all this?" Olivia couldn't answer. She just sobbed, her hands covering her face. That was all the confirmation anyone needed. By the end of the night, the house was empty, save for me and Olivia. She sat on the couch, broken and defeated, while I stood over her. "You brought this on yourself," I said quietly. "You thought you could lie and manipulate your way out of this, but you underestimated me." She didn't respond. For the first time since this whole ordeal began, she had nothing left to say. The fallout from the party was swift and merciless. Olivia's carefully curated image of the perfect wife shattered in an instant. Words spread like wildfire through our social circle, and by the end of the week, she was the subject of whispered conversations and pointed stares. James didn't escape unscathed either. His arrogance had earned him few friends, and now, with his affair exposed, even those acquaintances were turning their backs on him. But I wasn't done yet. The next morning, I met with Chandler to finalize the divorce proceedings. I handed him everything I'd gathered: emails, photos, recordings, even testimony from Rebecca and a few of Olivia's former friends who'd come forward after the party. Chandler's sharp eyes gleamed with approval as he reviewed the evidence. "This is airtight, Nathan," he said, nodding. "With this, we can make sure she doesn't walk away with a dime more than she deserves. And with the emails suggesting fraud, we might even have grounds for criminal charges." Criminal charges. The words sent a thrill through me, but I forced myself to stay focused. I wasn't doing this for revenge, not entirely. I needed to protect myself, to make sure Olivia couldn't spin this in her favor. The legal process began almost immediately. Olivia received the divorce papers 2 days later. The moment she saw the envelope, she stormed into the living room, her face twisted with rage. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, waving the papers in the air. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, not bothering to look up from my book. "You've been served." "You can't do this," she shouted. "You froze our accounts, you humiliated me in front of everyone, and now you're trying to take everything? This is my life too, Nathan." I set the book down and met her glare with a cold, steady gaze. "No, Olivia. You threw this life away the moment you decided to betray me. If you're upset about the consequences, you only have yourself to blame." She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came out. Finally, with a frustrated scream, she stormed out of the room. I heard the front door slam moments later, and I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and Rebecca. Olivia tried every trick in the book: emotional pleas, angry outbursts, even a half-baked attempt to reconcile, but I didn't budge. Chandler had warned me she might try to manipulate me, and I was ready. James, for his part, had gone silent. He wasn't returning Olivia's calls, and from what Rebecca had heard, he was panicking about his reputation. It turned out he'd been using Olivia just as much as she'd been using him, and now that their affair was public knowledge, he was desperate to distance himself from the scandal. Karma, I thought bitterly. Let them tear each other apart. The court proceedings were surprisingly smooth. With the mountain of evidence I'd presented, the judge sided with me on every major point. Olivia was awarded a small settlement, but it was a fraction of what she'd been hoping for. More importantly, the fraud accusations against her and James meant she couldn't touch my assets. When the ruling came down, Olivia looked like she'd been punched in the gut. She glanced at me from across the courtroom, her eyes pleading, but I didn't give her the satisfaction of a reaction. She had made her choices. Now she had to live with them. As we left the courthouse, Rebecca clapped me on the back. "You did it," she said, smiling. "It's over." I nodded, the weight of the past few months finally lifting. It wasn't quite over, not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. The divorce was finalized a week after the court ruling, and with it came a sense of closure I hadn't realized I needed. The house, once a symbol of the life Olivia and I had built together, now felt like a mausoleum for everything that had gone wrong. It was time to let it go. With Rebecca's help, I put the house on the market. The realtor was efficient, and within a month, it was sold to a young couple who seemed thrilled about starting their lives there. I didn't tell them the history of betrayal that lingered in those walls. Let them make their own memories. Packing up was cathartic in a way. Every box I filled felt like a small victory, a step closer to reclaiming my life. I threw out most of Olivia's things, except for a few items Chandler had advised me to keep for legal documentation. Her expensive perfume, the silk scarf, even the love notes to James. They all went into the trash where they belonged. Moving into my new apartment felt like stepping into a different world. It was a sleek, modern space downtown, smaller but filled with light and potential. Rebecca came by on my first night, bringing a bottle of whiskey to celebrate. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her glass. "To freedom," I replied, clinking mine against hers. The next few weeks were a blur of adjustments. I threw myself into work, determined to make up for the time and energy I'd wasted on Olivia's betrayal. My boss, who'd heard rumors about the situation, pulled me aside one day and offered his support. "Take whatever time you need, Nathan," he said. "We've got your back." It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to me. For the first time in months, I felt like I was in control again. Meanwhile, the fallout for Olivia and James continued to ripple outward. Olivia had moved in with her parents, who were less than thrilled about her behavior becoming public knowledge. Rebecca told me they'd barely been speaking to her, embarrassed by the scandal. James, on the other hand, was facing even worse consequences. His professional reputation was in tatters, and from what I'd heard, he'd been fired after his company caught wind of his role in the affair. Karma had done its work. One evening, as I sat on the balcony of my new apartment, watching the city lights twinkle, I allowed myself to reflect on everything. The pain of Olivia's betrayal was still there, but it no longer consumed me. Instead, it felt like a distant echo, a reminder of what I'd survived. Rebecca joined me for dinner that night, and as we talked, she said something that stuck with me. "You didn't just survive this, Nathan. You grew from it. That's more than most people can say." She was right. I had grown. I'd learned to trust myself again, to rely on my own strength instead of chasing after someone else's approval. Most importantly, I'd learned to value my own worth. In the months that followed, I started rebuilding my life piece by piece. I took up running, joined a book club, and even started dating again. Slowly, cautiously. Each step forward felt like a victory, a declaration that Olivia's betrayal wouldn't define me. The story didn't end with revenge or destruction, but with freedom. Freedom from lies, manipulation, and the weight of a toxic relationship. And in that freedom, I found something I hadn't felt in years: hope. Subscribe so you don't miss new stories on the channel.